You're going to have to be ready to face folks who will call you fake, that will hate on you, say that you're not a real American, not a real man, not a real woman, not real Black, Latino, Asian, etc. when you try to show your whole entire self. If people are going to catch feelings like about a fitted cap, right? Like, imagine how they're going to respond to a mixed race person, a man that's gentle and soft and kind, a strong, fierce woman, or an American that's not a white person. Right? Most of us don't have to imagine that because we experience it and we know that in our everyday lives. Schooling, right, not education, schooling will ask that you only show certain pieces of yourself that are considered acceptable. Education will work to change what you feel inside of you and what you see in the world around you. Education will allow you to exist authentically as your whole, complete, truest self. Okay? The problem, as I'm sure y'all already know, is that we don't live in a society where every baby is born into a life of opportunity, love, and resource. I want to take time, one more poll again. How many of you have ever played any Super Mario Brothers video game of any kind? Raise your hand. Have you ever played any Super Mario Brothers? Okay, cool. So I know it kind of seems random, right? But the reason I ask this is because at kind of the beginning of these Nintendo video games, there's always like the settings thing. You can kind of choose, easy, medium, difficult, like how you're about to play this game, right? And so I say this because if my life was a Super Mario Brothers video game, I would argue I was given a magic mushroom, a fire flower, a raccoon suit to help me fly through before I even started the game. Right? I lived in a 2-parent household. Both my mother and father were U.S. citizens, and both of them went to college. So I'd argue that some of the many privileges that came with my being Japanese and white in the Richmond, Wisconsin Unified Schools meant that the teachers that I encountered at the time, they did not fear me, and they refused to ever let me settle for a low grade. As a child, I witnessed what were mostly white teachers, at times lowering their academic expectations for my friends whose skin color was darker than mine or their own. I saw teachers of all colors on too many occasions fear the Black and brown children, especially the boys and young men in their classrooms, further pushing them towards an early physical and/or spiritual death. And while many battled and pushed back against these forces brilliantly, boldly, beautifully, too many of my darker-skinned community members and peers were forced to carry more burdens than they were ever meant to bear as young people. Many of my greatest teachers have and continue to be my friends, family members, mentors, community members who have had no choice but to take on these battles against oppression, educating and reminding me that while I may be able to understand pieces of their experiences, that I can never fully know their experiences. And I do my best to return that favor, pay it forward to folks who I perceive to be more privileged than myself. Right? If allowed to survive and thrive, those who had to start out the game, the Mario game, with the settings on maximum difficult in any level of life, those often become the most brilliant, razor-sharp players in the whole game. Right? In these settings, the easy, medium, difficult, they can change depending on who and where we are. Right? My grandparents were put into American concentration camps during World War II for being Japanese. Right? And 2 generations later, I'm considered a model minority. Right? That everyone's supposed to try to be like the Asians, right? Work hard, don't complain, right? And so with these myths, right? And so while playing basketball for Ellsworth, Ohio as the shortest, skinniest, and only Asian kid, it felt like I was maybe like a little Mario with the settings on extra difficult. But at the same time, I'd argue that in most schools, at every level, I would say that the lighter your skin, the more likely the settings in your game are going to help you win. I would argue that when traveling alone at nighttime on the street, bus, or train, those of us who are men, we get like the magic superstar that makes us less likely to be harmed or afraid on our ways home. Those of us like myself who are light-skinned, able-bodied, heterosexual males, have U.S. citizenship, get to move through all levels of American life with many less obstacles and enemies trying to defeat us than do dark-skinned, disabled, LGBTQ folks, undocumented immigrants, women, and especially dark-skinned, disabled, LGBTQ, undocumented immigrant women. So as I come to a close, and I realize a lot of what I've said here might appear that like I'm hopeless or something about the future, and I want y'all to know like 100% that that's not the case at all. As more and more research is done on the realities of educational inequality, and as more and more strategies are developed to actively support effective educators and their students, education will slowly and also hella painfully is going to take the place of schooling. And I can promise you this is not going to happen all at once, and it's going to take a long time, but I can promise you that it's going to be y'all that make this happen. I and many, many others are putting all of our chips down. Many of the folks in this room, outside of this room, the adults, are working tirelessly to transform, to support y'all, so that y'all can transform and save our world from war, environmental destruction, ignorance, and hatred. So your educators are everywhere, but you're going to have to work hella hard at times to identify them. They will be both inside and outside the classroom. They're in this room right now. They will be the ones who are there for you not only when things are going well, but when hope is hardest to find. They will be the ones who encourage you to become your truest and fullest authentic self. They will always try to ensure that challenge and support are equal in your life, and one never outweighs the other because they're going to want you to grow. Or as one of my mentors, Alison Tentianco Gubales says, pain plus love equals growth. I'll say that again, pain plus love equals growth. So these people are going to remind you that no human being on earth wears horns or halos. And when you identify these educators, if you haven't already begun to do so, hang on to them for dear life and don't let them go. Work to educate them in return because you are no more or less deserving of love and justice than anybody else. Right? In other words, no one makes it alone. And I think that one of the biggest kind of lies that we learn in America is there's this thing that the self-made man or woman is this real, actual thing. That somebody actually does it all by themselves. Right? And in reality, like, raise your hand if you gave birth to yourself. Right? Especially from, you pretty hatched from an egg, right? So especially from the ages of 0 to 7, no human being, like every human being from the ages of 0 to 7 needs somebody to be there or we just don't make it, right? And so, I kind of digress, but I want to end with something that a mentor of mine shared with myself and many others that has in many ways kind of freed me. So right now in Arizona, ethnic studies, Mexican American, Chicano, Rasta studies, and education that heals and transforms by teaching young people where they've come from and why they are where they are today is under attack because of the fear and ignorance reproduced by American schooling. In dedication to the educators and students there and here today, I'd like to end by reciting a piece of what the Yaqui people call en la quech, or I should say call, en la quech, or what would later be translated to the Spanish, tú eres mi otro yo. So these brilliant indigenous folks taught every young person from birth that each person that they came into contact with were a smoking mirror, right? So, and it was their duty to clear away the smoke that kept them from seeing their reflection in every other person that they came into contact with. So you're all a reflection of one another. And history has put a ton of both kind of imaginary but also literal smoke in front of our faces to keep us from seeing ourselves in each other. Education that frees and liberates is gonna push this smoke away, and I can't wait to see what y'all do with your educations when you're able to see those reflections. So I'm gonna end with this. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te daño a ti, me daño a mí mismo. Si te respeto a ti, me respeto a mí mismo. あなたは私の自己である。私はあなたを傷つける場合。私を人文人種の傷つける。私はあなたを尊敬している場合。私は人文人種の尊重します。You are my other self. If I hurt you, I hurt myself. If I respect you, I respect myself. Young people, y'all are hella precious. I love you. Thank you so much.